welcome back. And as was mentioned earlier in the show, the focus of this segment is on International Social Work Day. And here to tell us a bit more about social work itself and what is offered at the University of Belize, we are joined by Catherine Espadas, who is a student at the UB Social Work Department, Azalea LaRue, lecturer at the UB Social Work Department, and chair, Fermin Oliveira. Good morning,
Good morning.
and welcome.
Good morning.
So this is perhaps one of the topics or areas of social science that we don't talk about as often, but is most definitely needed in a country like Belize. And I want to start off just by getting a synopsis as to what social work entails. So let's start with you, Fermin.
Okay, well, social work is in and of itself a recognized treatment approach to help people. Along with that, social work is a recognized profession as well, meaning there's a set of values and ethics, code of conduct for the profession. And over the years, it has been growing in Belize, and we are very happy of the strides that we are making in this country. And the University of Belize is the only institution that has a program to provide formal education for professionals in this area.
Yeah.
Now, what prompted the genesis of a social work program?
In Belize, well, to the best of my knowledge, social work practice in Belize was, I would say, rudimentary based on what people did, the best way they knew how. And I think it was right around 1980, sometime around there. There was the recognition that social workers needed training, and from that idea came, they liaised with partners, and at that time it was the University College of Belize that started an Associates of Social Work program, and a couple of years after they developed a bachelor degree in social work, and that's the humble history of social work. It came from the need of people that were working in the field needing training, and we're here some 12 or 13 years later.
Now, this is, I think, one of the most important things to look at, because there are many people in any society that rise to meet the needs of whatever is identified in a community or larger municipalities. And, they're kind-hearted people. Sometimes it's through churches, sometimes it's through smaller groups in an area. And they would function like a social worker within those areas. Why is it important that people who are engaging in helping others are able to have formal training in the work that they're doing?
Well, let me be very, very honest and maybe candid at the same time, that having a good heart goes a long way.
Yeah.
And traditionally, that was the backbone of social workers in this country, and I think pretty much make up a good sector of the workforce.
Yeah.
But social work is a profession. It has a body of knowledge that goes with that. And not only the complexity, but in order to improve the effectiveness of the worker, it is indispensable to provide formal training. It's so broad because people are so diverse and the challenges are very different. So social work education, there is no substitute for social work education. And if you couple that with care and kindness of an individual, then you really have a home runner.
You definitely have to have the heart. I think that's probably your first thing on the checklist. But Azalea, let's talk about some of the foundation that is laid within the formal school setting for social workers to be able to execute their duties.
And I wanted to ask also, why did all three of you get involved in social work?
Well, let's do foundation first.
And the foundation starts with the heart.
Yeah.
I think it's more of a calling than I want to be a social worker. And I tell this to my students a lot. You have to have that calling to want to be in the profession first. But you have to remember your professional boundaries at the same time. And that is the need for training there. That it's an art and it's a science. And that is why we have the academia world there of the science, knowing the different models, the different theories and so forth in social work in order to be able to work with individuals or communities or groups in different systems. I think that is where a lot of people might not see it. Like, I want to help, but where does the boundary lie? And how do we do it? And then
what's the most effective way, I would imagine?
What is the most effective way? And then you also mentioned, why is it necessary that we learn these techniques? And one of the reasons it's necessary, it's because you could do more harm than good. If you're not held accountable for what you're doing, you will definitely do a lot more harm than good.
And then to the reason you are inclined to do social work. Let's start with you, Catherine, as the recent student.
Well, like they said, it starts with the heart. You have to want, it has to be something you want to do. You have to want to help people. And then furthermore, you have to find a cause that you want to get behind. Maybe it's for women's rights or kids, the protection of children, helping the elderly, advocating for the vulnerable populations. And once you find out which group of people you really want to see enhance their social functioning, then you realize, okay, I need to get the proper education. What techniques do I use to help these people? And you move from there.
How long you've been in the program, and what has been perhaps the most eye-opening kind of experience that you've had so far?
Well, I've been in the social work program for probably 2 years, and something that has really opened my eyes is that you realize that maybe you feel you can deal with all of these clients openly, no biases, just because I want to help. But you realize that human nature, you have to put your personal values and stuff like that aside, and then look at it for the better good of that client.
Yeah. What population are you most inclined to work with?
I think women and children. Yeah.
Now,
Well, let's
that's
ask
an
the
interesting,
lecturers too, in terms of your choice to get involved in this area.
Well, mine is communities, I think. That's what I would like to work with. And just because I believe in families and communities as our foundation to build our society, to build neighborhood society, to build Belize as well. I think that is where it all starts. You know, if our theme for the social work exhibit, it's respecting, promoting the dignity and worth of people. And as Catherine mentioned, that's one of the hard things, because we're all humans. We want to judge others. So when you sit there, when you go to a social worker, even if it's in a clinical setting, as a clinical social worker, you want to think, is this person judging me? That's the first thought.
Yeah.
You know, so, and we're all humans.
But you were taught how to put that aside, and focus on the issues, and that goes back to the formal training. Firmin, as a male in the social work profession.
That's a highlight right, because social work is female dominated. It's a female dominated profession around the world. So I'm one of the few
Is it because
anywhere.
of the caring aspects that people think it entails?
Well, you know what, that may be one of those, you know, but for whichever reason, it is female dominated, and I think it comes with the nurturing probably or whatever else is involved. So I'm one of the few, what has led to this is, you know, the caring nature, just wanting to help people as well. The calling is that first thing. You're not exactly sure how that will pan out, but really a focus has been people, wanting to help people. So I had the opportunity to pursue some formal education. By training, I am a counselor. So, and I have no regrets thus far. I mean, it's like, there's nothing maybe more magical than to see that you can help someone and see the changes. That's really special.
Now, Azalea, you mentioned something that really stuck with me, the whole idea of caring for others but still establishing boundaries and developing the tools. How do you pass that on to students, for example, like Catherine? Because she mentioned something very important. Very often, we don't recognize our own biases. And it's not until we're placed in a situation that very often we then get into a difficult position where we have to examine ourselves. So how do you work with students to kind of do that heavy lifting before they actually encounter someone that will actually test what they really believe in?
The first thing is knowing yourself, and we do a lot of exercises, a lot of activities within class period at a time, and the other thing is knowing knowledge of others. In terms of, if we don't know someone, if we don't know about that person, then we're more likely to hold those biases towards someone, not knowing them. So those are very important factors there. Self-worth as well, we try to enhance self-worth, knowing that the client, whoever is the client, whether it's a group or a family, the important part is to enhance their well-being and let them take on the role, not you. You're not making those goals for them, but they're doing the change.
In a nutshell though, like what Azalia said, a lot of social work education is to deconstruct the person's way of thinking. And that happens in many ways in the classroom with activities, and like what Azalia said, it's self-reflection. And you really have to dig deep. I can tell you, algebra is algebra everywhere. And social work is one of those professions that is unique in of itself, that it really helps you understand the world you live in and understand people in that context. Yeah. So it's really, the focus is on having people rethink how they see the world and others in it. And that helps you to be able to buffer and to not be as judgmental as otherwise you would be inclined to be.
How difficult was that process for you, Catherine? Because that is extremely important, that knowledge of self and how you have been viewing the world prior to your training.
Well, as you mentioned, it would be very difficult. Well, it was very difficult for me because I thought that I was pretty open-minded and, free-spirited, and until you realize, okay, if I was put in a situation where maybe I have a client that did something my personal values would go against, how do I put that aside and not judge this person and continue to work in their best interest? Because ultimately that's the goal, to work in their best interest. But if you have this sort of bias against their actions personally, it would put up a wall. But then with the exercises you do in class, you already have exposure to certain things that you might encounter. So that helps, and then it helps you to view these people in a different light, like perhaps reason why they would do something like that. Mm-hmm. And then you start to develop a different way of thinking. So your mind, it basically opens your mind to the different reasons behind why you might have these biases, and then it helps you to change.
I have another question in the same vein, because a lot of people are very suspicious of social workers, counselors, etc. How do you get students to honor confidentiality in all manners? Because it starts very early on. And I know that's a major challenge in Belize, because people think, well, I know everybody. And even if you run into somebody, more than likely, I may see Catherine out after we've had some encounter in a professional setting. I might see her out at the club or somewhere else, so you run into people, and it's such a small place that people see Catherine and you go like, oh my God, I hope she doesn't say anything about what I told her, kind of thing. Even though it's on a social work basis, it still has those parameters of confidentiality.
It's a barrier that outsiders need. I mean, we know it's important and part of your training, but for people to overcome it.
Well, first thing is that, like, as students, and us, we were all students, it put you in places of vulnerability to understand, first of all, how vulnerable people feel spilling their guts at you and what you need to do with that information. So we place students intentionally, and they take chances, and this is, of course, it is guided, but that's where you learn. Because you cannot hold people's information respectfully and in confidence if you yourselves don't take a chance on what's real in your life. So that's one of those scenarios. And in practical terms, we would tell clients, if you see me out and you acknowledge me, you give them that preference to acknowledge you in public. and then you would in turn return the acknowledgement. But otherwise you would pass each other like supermarket or the disco without any sense of, acknowledgement. But the client is the one that is given that preference to take the chance with you. Because, for example, I have many clients in counseling. They might see me with somebody or whatever, and I don't want one to be placed in a position where I have to be giving explanation, well, who is this person? How do you know him or her? So in order to avoid that, you make it clear in the beginning. Belize is small, or community is small, you see me at Broders or anywhere, you don't have to acknowledge me, but if you do, I will respond. So you give them that option.
Yeah.
And that's one way,
The profession does follow a code of ethics as well, and with that we have, if it's clinical social work, it's the plan change process. And we have our students know the first thing before doing a assessment, before even doing the intake, the first thing is the confidentiality. And they do sign something saying that it will be confidential between us unless there is harm to you or to others.
I want to touch on that just a bit, because I think that the issue of ethics is obviously one that, because of the personal information that you hold, that people probably question a lot. What is the process in terms of ensuring that persons who who are social workers maintain their ethical boundaries? And in terms of the larger scheme, what is being done to ensure that people who are in helping professions, whether or not they are formally trained, will also ensure those ethical boundaries?
Well, that's a great opportunity for us. Actually, we have just registered a professional social work association.
Excellent.
And we're hoping, and clearly Azalea is involved in lots of this, and that's one of the benefits of having young people, energetic people joining you, to be honest with you.
That all the time.
we tried that some years ago with little success. But what role that association would be, one is to help regulate the profession. As it is there for violations of the code of ethics, as an example, there is no really legal process to. In the United States, for example, there will be sanctions. Social workers must belong to the National Association of Social Workers in the United States. So we hope to be able to participate in that, to help not only regulate but streamline, and to ensure that we have good standards for people working with vulnerable people in our country.
And in a very clear, practical example, why is it important that all persons involved in helping other people are a part of a professional association?
To be held accountable.
Yeah.
We're all held accountable for something. If we're not held accountable, then we don't have we cannot any punishment or anything of that sort, any sanctions. And I think that's the most important thing, to be held accountable for what we're doing, for the work we do.
You mentioned before that even in the best of intentions, people can do more harm than good. How do you explain that? I mean, and I want to give a very specific example, because it's one of the things that we have looked at on the show as well. There are many organizations that are popping up on a daily basis. Some of them are offering financial help, some are offering in-kind services, and some are offering support and mentorship and counseling services. It obviously is, as I mentioned, coming from, well, we hope is coming from a good place. People want to help other people. But my concern on a personal level has always been, how trained are people to be able to do this, and will they be getting the results that they're actively seeking? So as social workers, as professionals in this industry, what is your thought? What are your thoughts on these emerging groups and populations that want to do social work in their community?
Well, for one, we are hoping that somebody has some kind of oversight over what is going on. And I think that would fall, maybe in some respects, the Ministry of Human Development and the regulation that they do, social service agencies, kinds of things. But I think you're right, Marlene, in that when you're working with vulnerable people, in my practice, I work a lot with juveniles, young people in conflict with the law, boys and girls. And it is quite possible that you misinterpret or take advantage of situations, and we always want to be mindful about the vulnerability of people, and that people aren't doing harm, committing harm. So it is very important.
Yeah.
You know, and the system is set up, well, we were hoping that there are systems in place, checks and balances, supervision. In professional practice, everybody will tell you, and it is understood that every social worker needs a social worker. Because somebody is kind of keeping tabs on what is going on, and that must be something that is standard. Every social worker needs to continue to do professional development training in his area, you know. So, and that those are just layers to help you to provide oversight, because there are what we would consider mortal sins in social work profession. For example, if a counselor or so would be, or if you involve in an inappropriate way with your client, that's the end of your profession to my mind. There's no apology, that is just the end.
Yeah.
And we
in your mind, but not in our legislation, and not in actual procedural practices in the country.
Right. So and that is what we need to, because we need to. It's not about punitive; it's about accountability. And the way how we gain respect is that we are entrusted with lots of authority and lots of information. So we need to be very mindful to be great stewards of this kind of information and the people we work with, you know.
Another more simple answer to that is we have formed the association, the Belize National Association of Social Workers, and the other step is to form again licensing. And that, I think, again, licensing and accountability to the individual, then you will probably you'll be a little bit more at ease knowing that someone is regulating. We have a board, and they're regulating the person that you're working with.
Now, very often people fall into social work, you know, sometimes by, you know, nature of what they do, whether it's a pastor or somebody in a community position, community leader, etc. How do you get people to understand that you do have these code of ethics, etc., and that you can be trained, that it does not have to end there? And I'm sure that's what the program tries to do, but people are not necessarily going to stop their lives to go, now I need social work skills to actually deal. So how do you get people to understand that the training might make you better at what you do?
Well, I don't know how we get people to understand that, but I think there's a recognition that there are certain skill sets and knowledge base that you need to really be an effective social worker. And you're right. We have had lay ministers and even pastors in our program pursuing social work, and they're great at it, and good, solid, believing people in it. And I think they just become better. And I need to say this. There is, in the purity of social work, it doesn't conflict with religious values.
Yeah.
Because we are not there to dictate, you know, we are not converting people, we are helping people. Yeah. And actually, in my frame of thinking, I think for people who maybe are Christians, I think about Jesus himself as the eminent social worker. I mean, he could turn stone into bread and feed people. Those are basic elements of a great social worker. How do you improve the conditions of people in whatever circumstance they have? And so in my thinking, and even in presenting aspects of this, there's really no conflict. It can just enhance you, because the reality is that compared to maybe 50 years ago, William and Marlene, what we know about people and how they operate, and societies, how they develop, and what molds us. I mean, we have information. Yeah. So we can't, it's just not just having good intentions. And I have good pastor friends who have said the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So there's something else. You need to have knowledge and skills.
And techniques
and
that
techniques
you can use.
Too.
Yeah. Let me just ask, in terms of what you've been seeing at the university, is it a growing profession? Do you have more interest? And what is the male and female ratio that you're seeing at this time?
It is definitely a growing profession. It is. We have a lot of new intakes from where it started, where the program started.
Fantastic.
It is most dominated by female as well. In a class of 30, I would say I have 2 male if I'm lucky.
Wow.
So that's right. And William, to answer, to go back a little bit to what you had asked as well, I think the word social work, it's used widely by many without knowing the definition of what who a social worker is. And and in the U.S. it's the same. They have encountered that issue with the word social work. So what we do is to try to, if you're working in a service agency and you don't have a bachelor's in social work or a master's in social work, a PhD, then you're not able to call yourself or refer to yourself as a social worker. You refer to yourself as a social service worker, and that's one of the main differences and distinctions between someone that has been through that training and has that education.
Now, unfortunately, it's been a situation where social workers in Belize get a bad rap, and I don't, we focused a lot on the professionalism because of where we've seen some misguided information start. The work, for example, of social workers is usually most often linked to human services and, the people who come in and take your children. Let's be honest.
Yep.
And so I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about the scope of work that any of your students or graduates can be able to pursue after they've been able to get their degree. And also to remind people what the role of a social worker is, even when they're with the Human Services Department and may go in and unfortunately disrupt what you had seen as your functioning family.
Right, and that takes us back to our exhibition, the International Social Work Exhibition. We will be having different exhibits, so we'll be having, and that is coming from a diverse population, diverse agencies, and that helps different vulnerable individuals. My students as well, it started from an initiative from my classroom, an assignment. The students are putting together their exhibit. Catherine, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Particularly, our group is focusing on who are social workers and what we actually do. It's not just, we're coming to take away your children, because that isn't the goal in the first place. The goal is to always try to keep the child in that family, but to make sure that that family is going to raise the child in the right way, that the child is the well-being of the child. But the exhibition is to serve that purpose, to inform the community of what we actually do and the different roles we can play. It's not just in child services. We can function in the home for the elderly. We function with juveniles in different areas. So, like I said, the exhibition will be about that. Our style particularly will be who are social workers. The other styles will be doing the other functions, maybe as broker or a mediator in mental health and stuff like that. So if the community comes out, then they can become informed about that.
Fantastic. So what was the one misconception that you had going into the social work program that's
Notice
now been...
she's putting into practice what Fermin said, making you vulnerable on TV, right?
Well, I feel that people I didn't think that people would judge you right off the bat when you say, oh, I'm a social work major. You feel like they would probably be more open to hear what you want to do or what your plans are, but they come right off the back and say, oh, you're gonna take away my children. And that's the one thing I really didn't think they would do.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So people can come out to the exhibition and learn what you actually do, the full scope of work that can be done. And
well, the exhibition, we have a great lineup. We have different groups joining us: BCVI, Life and Circle.
PASMO will be there, UNICEF we have as well. We will be having an opening ceremony where we have invited as our keynote speaker Ms. Kim Simplice Barrow, so she'll be there as our keynote speaker again, based mostly on women's and children. We'll have some seminars throughout the day that will start at 11, where we'll have Miss Erica Castellanos from CNET. We will be having an executive director as well from the CFC and NCFC, and NDAC as well, the National Drug Abuse Control Council. So Mr. Esnarveos will be there. We'll be having Ms. Ganesha Brannan from the Human Service Department. So it's very diverse. Again, our circle, we're promoting a lot of new organizations.
That are providing social services. And it's an open event. People are welcome to come. We're inviting especially the schools to come out. And of course, we'll be talking about the association itself, So come out and be informed. And we need to celebrate social work because we recognize it is a growing profession. It is of great value to the communities and the people we serve. So
I think increasing funding as well, that would be for our National Association of Social Workers and for the Student Association that is formed.
We're hoping to do that because at the exhibition, it's not just going to be information. We're hoping to raise funds, so there will be stuff on sale, pastries, food, drinks, soft drinks, water, stuff like that. And then there will be entertainment for the kids. The primary school children, the high school children that come out, we're going to have entertainment for them so that it's an active day. It's not just about hearing maybe the same thing over and over, but to have activities.
Social work in action.
All right.
Be exposed.
Best of Luck takes place March 15th at the IT Vet Center here in Belize City, and it starts at 9.
Right, and would I be able, I wanted to mention our sponsors, of course, because without it, that has been our #1 challenge, has been our the finance. This is one of our videos that we have done to promote World Social Work Day as well. Avant-Garde, again, they have been one of our biggest sponsors. They have done the video, the graphic designing and all that for us. A lot of printing companies such as Impact Designs, Dolphin Productions, First Impressions as well. We've gotten support from Boyne & Boyne. We've gotten support from some private businesses as well. Simon Kwan, A&R, Broders, this Social Security. Yes, that was, and again, G. Gunger and Sons Limited, which promoting the Tootsie Ideals. You'll have those for sale. So we're inviting a lot of the schools, the primary schools, the high schools, to come be engaged in what social workers do.
All right.
Well, we wish you all the best, and thank you very much for joining us this morning.
And thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, it's to talk about a public forum on gender-based violence. So stay tuned.